Can I go back to China for a second? The president yesterday said that the meeting next week with China will be a difficult one, and he referred to massive trade deficits. Now, what sort of tone is he hoping to set for this meeting?
Well, I think he's been very clear with.
Why is it going to be so difficult?
Why is what?
Why is it going to be so difficult, as he says?
Well, there's big issues. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody in terms of we've got both national security issues in terms of our political posture towards North Korea, the threat of a missile that extends further and further, the tests that they're using, their nuclear capability. Those should all be very concerning. And then on the trade front, we've got serious concerns with what they're doing, our trade practices with them, some of the things that were mentioned in the past. But I mean, there's a lot of areas that we need to be concerned about with trade. And I think, that there's this isn't a sit around and play patty cake kind of conversation. They're big issues. The president's been making it very clear for decades, frankly, of the challenges that we face. And I think he wants to have a very good and respectful and healthy relationship. But he also wants to make sure that he tackles the challenges and the problems that are facing American workers, American manufacturers, and get to them. I'm going to go my first seat and then Glenn because he's patient. First Skype seat, Maurice Goodman from WWDB AM in Philly. So shout out to Hallie's old stations.
It'll be in Philadelphia. It's Randall Jefferson. The question is, President Trump signed an executive order that intends to deny funding to cities that refuse to share immigration status information. Attorney General Sessions recently suggested that cities could not only lose future funds, but that the federal government may require them to pay back grants. Will there be a when will this take place? And will that money be reallocated to other departments like Department of Education or HBCUs?
Well, I'm not. I would say that the president finds it unacceptable that some localities and counties and potentially some states have prioritized a political agenda over the safety of their people by flouting our nation's immigration laws, becoming so-called sanctuary cities. The failure to follow federal law can have tragic consequences for all of our citizens and all of our country. It's particularly concerning in a place like Chicago and other cities like yours in Philadelphia, where there's been increased violence. Immigrants, both legal and illegal, are not safe when criminals who have committed egregious acts are free to roam the streets. And the Attorney General has issued a public notice reminding all states and local jurisdictions of their responsibilities to comply with federal laws. With respect to the budget piece, I think we've got an ongoing budget process, and we'll have to see how many states comply and where, if any, potential savings are there, and then how we reallocate them. But I think the president's budget, both his FY17 contingency budget for funding beyond this continuing resolution on April 28th, and then his FY18 budget that he's already submitted, we're going to reflect some key priorities, both in terms of homeland security and national defense. So we'll see where we would reallocate any of that money, but I think the priority is clear, is to get cities into compliance and to make sure that we understand there's not just a financial impact to this, but also a very clear security aspect to this. Glenn?
Two things, John. First, just to follow up on something you said before, you said that Hillary Clinton had personal contact with Vladimir Putin, and the suggestion was that wasn't necessarily appropriate. Can you just elaborate what you were?
No, I'm not saying that's the contact of it in itself is not appropriate. Is not.
As a private citizen or as a?
No. I think what I'm saying is that when you talk about connections to Russia, I think the only connection that anyone's made with President Trump is multiple years ago. He hosted a pageant there, and he owns condos around the world, and some of them were sold to some Russians, and I think he sold a house to one several years back. That's his connection. When you talk about the other side, you look at what the Obama administration's connections, where you have a Secretary of State that was selling a fifth of our country's uranium. You have a Clinton Foundation concern with some of the donations they got. You've got the former president, her husband, giving paid speeches, getting a personal call from Vladimir Putin. You've got a stated goal of their of that administration, of Secretary Clinton, to have a reset to, quote, strengthen Russia. So when you compare the two sides in terms of who's actually engaging with Russia, trying to strengthen them, trying to act with them, trying to interact with them. It is night and day between our actions and her actions, and yet no one questioned what she was doing or how she was handling it. And yet,
Her pattern of behavior is more suspicious than President Trump's?
I think that if you compare the two, it's definitely, when you talk about the stuff that went to their foundation, the concerns that existed around the sale of 1/5 of all the country's uranium, the paid speeches, the personal calls from Vladimir Putin, I think that when you want to look at a connection to Russia, there is a clear one there and much less of one that ever existed on this side. Trey.
Hey, Sean, I just wanted one. Wait,
Hold on.
one other thing. So, Sean, in terms of the Nunez chronology, just to clarify, when we're asking questions about process like dates and people, we're not attempting to ascertain the geography of the executive complex. We want to know who knew what when.
I understand that.
So my question is, so I will ask that directly. Forget about the technical questions. Mr. Nunez was on the campus. You say we don't know who let him in the gate, so
Right.
apparently it is, and you described, I believe, this is a normal process, right? Tell me if it is normal the way that I am describing it. Mr. Nunez, the head of an investigatory committee, is allowed to roam around the executive complex, we don't know who let him in, to speak to two deputy-level members of the National Security Council. He is then allowed to see information. He then obtains an appointment, from my understanding of the chronology, with the President of the United States to disgorge that information. He then goes public with that information. Then, 7 or so days later, you say it would be appropriate for everybody to come down here and look at it. Is that a normal process?
Well, I would take issue with a number of the aspects of your chronology. Number one, which you're forgetting, is that initially he is the one that publicly said, well before any of this came to light in terms of the president's March 5th tweet, that he was just looking into this whole matter. He, according to John Roberts' his own reporting, just said that neither of those individuals, as described in your paper's reporting, are accurate. So I would dispute several of the pieces of that. And then as far as him roaming around the White House. No, I understand this, but you jump to a ton of conclusions about, and again, I love watching some of these shows where they jump to conclusions for all. Hold on.
Several times prejudged the investigation is clearing the White House. You've said it twice at the podium today.
Right.
So we're
what
not
I'm saying is
prejudging.
because I'm focused on the substance of this, Glenn. I'm actually, right. And so where's any of the reporting been in your paper about Evelyn Faucus and her revelation that this is what they sought to do? Where has been the reporting in your paper that NBC News just recently covered that other officials? You seem to be really focused on who showed up where and what door they went in and how it happened. To answer your question, yes, it's appropriate for a member of Congress to contact someone who has contacted him according to some of these reports. I don't know the answer to that, but if you're asking me, is it appropriate for a member of Congress to come over here? As Chairman Nunez has said himself, he wasn't hiding or roaming. He was asked to come over here by an individual. He came over, which happens daily. He was asked to go somewhere. He went there. He is cleared. And nothing that is inappropriate, and exactly the opposite. What he did, what he saw, and who he met with was 100% proper.
Did the Chief of Staff, who is, in my understanding, an exceptionally attentive gatekeeper to who comes in and out of the Oval Office, did the Chief of Staff know that he was on the campus? Did he approve his?
No, so remember,
clearance?
you're okay, but you're playing cute there. You're doing two things. One is you're talking about the Oval Office, and the other one is the campus. Right? So, no, the Chief of Staff does not know every single person who's on the 18 acres at any given time. They are people who are appropriately either cleared or waved through the system or are escorted on in some way, shape, or form. No, we don't track every single person who's on the 18 acres. Do we know, generally speaking, who's in the Oval Office? Not all the time, because people can go in. But if there was a meeting, in that case, we all sat back here. He made the announcement, and again, you're leaving out a key part. He actually briefed the press before he told anyone. We all found out, you, me, everyone else, that he was coming down here after he held a press conference with your colleagues to say he was coming down here based on stuff that he'd found that didn't have to do with Russia, that a whistleblower source had given him. Now, the other reporting that I'm hearing today is actually that the sources that you describe in your paper are not accurate. And while I'm not going to comment on either, I think there is an assumption that everything and the chronology that we know over is accurate, which I don't believe from further reporting that it is. And I also believe that some of the comments that have come out publicly in terms of some of the Obama administration are conveniently left out of that discussion. I think that that is interesting, how no one seems to really cover the fact that in a senior Obama administration with high-level clearances talked about the spreading of classified information for political purposes, and no one seems to care.
But just to be clear, Mr. Priebus Mr. Kushner, Mr. Bannon did not have knowledge of his being on the campus having this interaction with
I
national
don't.
security
I don't know. Again, you asked two questions and you melded them together. No one knew that he was coming to speak to the president. He announced that on television during a press conference. Tamara.
Yeah, my understanding is that Dr. Farkas left the administration in 2015. So
Okay.
why is what she said in 2017 relevant to something that allegedly happened in 2016?
The question I would have for you is exactly, why is it? What is she says in her things, I'm urging my colleagues, I'm urging it to get the Hill, but it's odd that the presumption seems to be, why is it interesting? Have you asked her?
No, you're the
No,
one
you
telling
haven't.
us to
So
front it
she
right now.
no, but she's been on television talking about what she's done, and you seem to have made no.
I don't believe everything I see on TV.
Well, neither do I. But I also I would assume that as a reporter that actually is interested in this story, a senior Obama administration official that handled Russia, that all Obama administration officials generally are. Thank you. I appreciate the timeline. But I'm well aware of when it was. But my point is you seem to be rushing to her defense. At some point, she went on television and talked about actions that she and her colleagues took to spread classified information. And instead of defending her, it might be worth asking her what she's talking about, who she spread it to, why she did it, was it appropriate, who cleared her to do it. Maybe those are questions that can ask instead of asking me to defend why a former Obama administration official is revealing stuff that should be extremely concerning. So I'm going to go back to Tamara.
One other question, which is, are you more concerned about that or Russian interference in the presidential election?
Well, I think that if I'm, as an American citizen, I'm very concerned about the fact that people potentially were sharing information about other Americans for political purposes and using classified information to do so and leaking it. That should be concerning to everybody. I mean,
The Russian interference?
no, that's
in the
not what I
election?
said. Please stop trying to. It's not. No.
It's just like, which is worse?
No, and I guess I don't. I mean, the answer is I think if someone's interfering with our election, that's not good. I don't think that someone revealing and leaking classified information is good either. I'm not sure that you should have to choose. I think that you can have outrage and concern for both, and I don't think we should have to pick as an American whether or not which freedom we want to have undermined. I think we should expect both of them, and so the idea that we should have to choose whether or not we want someone to interfere with our election or protect our civil liberties isn't one that we should want or that we should have questioned.